Is it okay for me to go forward now? Okay. So just to kind of get us all on the same page, just some things to be mindful of today. We want to, hear from each other and hear about our different experiences in this community or other communities that we've grown up in, and just allow each other to speak without interrupting. We also just want to assume good intentions from everybody in the room and be mindful of the impact of our words and the things that we're sharing, and just kind of value each other's courage to speak and to ask questions. I think that that's one of the best ways that we can learn, is just sort of by boldly asking questions about things that maybe we don't know about, and learning together, taking risks in our learning. And sometimes we make mistakes in that, and that's okay. This is a good space for that. And just kind of being mindful of our participation level. I'd love to hear from all of you at different points of this presentation today. And as always, take care of yourself. Like if there's anything that comes up that feels uncomfortable or anything like that, feel free to take a bathroom break, grab some water. I'm a pretty casual presenter, so do whatever you need to enjoy our presentation today. So I want to just kind of start off by saying that this work is based on training from the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. So there's lots of different trainings that you can do around anti-oppression, anti-racism work, and it comes from lots of different lenses. So I just want to be clear that that is really where my framework for this work comes from. And that work is based on groundwork that was laid by really amazing, fierce lesbian activists in our community specifically that started our movement to end the violence against women. So I just want to thank the people that came before us to do all of that work, because that is why Peace at Home is here today. So to kind of get us started off, what can make conversations about oppression and racism so difficult or feel kind of challenging or uncomfortable? I think one thing, recently is sort of political climates or political ideas can make it difficult to feel comfortable having conversations about things that really kind of touch on things that are core to people and how they believe, or how we've grown up, or the things that we've been taught. And, even just like in the presidency of Trump, he was trying to pass laws and legislations to prohibit federal employees to get training around, white supremacy or anti-oppression work. And, at one point we even wondered if that would affect us, because we do get federal funding. So there were kind of things that felt like there were some barriers coming up to being able to have these conversations. And, just cancel culture, right? So we've seen a lot of strong leaders kind of be taken down by saying something that was kind of funky or didn't feel good to people. And so sometimes we can feel kind of nervous about maybe saying things if we don't know if we're right or wrong in what we're going to say or how we're going to be perceived, right? Perception is really important. So to kind of get us started in a way to sort of think about some of the things that influence our own personal lens. When you came in, I don't know if everybody was able to get one, but Mackenzie's going to pass them out for us. And for folks that are on the Zoom, I believe that Mackenzie's going to add it to the chat for us. So hold tight for just a second if you're in the Zoom. So this is an activity that kind of will get us to think a little bit about what our own personal lens is and the things that sort of inform the way that we see the world. So I want you all to just take a little bit to fill this out. And we will come back together in just a second. I feel like the first time that I did this activity, it helped me really understand better what my personal lens was, because I think, we we all come to the table with this idea that we're very open, and it is really hard to identify sometimes what our biases are. And so seeing kind of what our personal lens is and the way that we view the world has a lot to do with what we've come from and what we've been able to experience. And that is such a beautiful thing. Some of the things that came up were traumas and tragedies, but those things have still made us the people that we are today, all the things that we've overcome. And so just a really beautiful way to kind of think about who we are and maybe why we are who we are. Okay. I think I skipped it. Okay, so identity is just an umbrella term used for our own individual comprehension of ourself, or a set of behavioral or personal characteristics which help us feel like we belong to a member of a group. So I really like this picture that goes along with that, because it's a cute little cat that feels like it belongs with the bunnies, right? It has its bunny ears on. And so you couldn't tell that cat any different. That cat belongs to the bunnies. So in thinking about identity, this is going to be another activity for a minute. So if folks in the chat want to weigh in the chat, great. But I'm going to have you in pairs or a couple people that are around you. So at the bottom of the slide, there are some identity markers. So we have race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, class, nationality, age, ability, and spiritual beliefs. So the questions to kind of go over together are, which one of these identities do you think about the most? Which one do you think about the least? And which one do you feel has the strongest effect on how you see yourself as a person? So we'll take a couple minutes to go over this. So in the ones of our identity that we think about the least, the thing that I kind of want to bring out of that is that oftentimes the parts of our identity that we think about the least are the areas where we have the most privilege in. So for example, for me, when I was coming to this training today, I wasn't thinking about my ability. I'm an able-bodied person. And so I wasn't thinking about, is there going to be an elevator that I have to take to get upstairs? I hate elevators. Is there, am I going to be able to hear everybody in the room? Yes, I am. So I have a lot of privilege in my ability. That's not the way that I see the world. I don't have to think about my world that way. And so it's kind of like in my blind spot almost when I'm thinking about the way I provide services. I don't always think about folks that are not able-bodied because it's just not the way I walk around the world. See if I can. Okay. So just for context, we all experience different privileges, and that kind of changes at different points in our lives as well. Some of us might have grown up in poverty, and now we're in a different place in our life where we feel like we're in a different financial situation. So the way that we experience privilege changes throughout our lives. As long as there has been oppression, there's also been people that have been working for liberation and to fight against that oppression. And that's where we all come in, because we all have the power to respond in different ways and new ways to the models that we've been given. We've all just kind of been handed this system, and we're trying to work through it and navigate it, and it doesn't work for all of us. It doesn't work for a lot of people, right? A lot of the institutions that we might be working in. So how do we address those barriers of unrepresented groups in our work? I'm sure that there have all been times that we have felt like we haven't been able to meet the needs of our clients in the organizations that we work with, the places that we volunteer, kind of the barriers that come up for us. So one of the things that comes to mind for me is that for so long, the movement to end violence against women has been all about women. And that is important because the majority of violence that is perpetrated against women is, perpetrated at the hands of males. But we also know that that makes it very underreported that men feel comfortable coming forward and talking about their experiences with violence at the hands of an intimate partner. So for a long time, I don't think that we did justice to men that needed support and needed help because our framework was so focused on women. And so, now we are in a place where we have a male advocate in our office, and it has changed everything about the way that men feel comfortable coming into our office and being able to see somebody that represents who they feel they are. They can identify with that person, and it's changed everything about the way that they kind of interact with us as an agency and the way that we're seen in the community, and that's huge. So just kind of identifying that at different points, like we have all felt, right, like we are not able to meet the needs of the people that we're trying to serve for whatever reason. So this is just one definition of oppression. And again, this comes from the Oregon Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. And so oppression is the systematic and pervasive mistreatment of individuals on the basis of their membership in a disadvantaged group. It involves an imbalance in power and one group benefiting from the systemic exploitation of other groups. And it can occur on many different levels. So interpersonal, cultural, institutional, and structural. So we have a little like a math equation with words at the bottom. So power times privilege times prejudice equals oppression. So all of those things have to be present in order for there to be that oppression. So some of the common elements of that is that what is considered normal and what folks feel is normal is based on a standard of rightness or wrongness. Norms and assumptions are backed up then by institutional power. So folks that have power to kind of reinforce those beliefs. And then institutional and interpersonal violence can also kind of lift up that oppression. Okay, so when we're thinking about all of these things, kind of putting boxes around kind of what is our mindset for moving forward. How does this oppression impact the people that we're working with? So survivors or clients, however you refer to the people that you're working with. So obviously it limits access to resources. There's a loss of community. So if you don't feel like you fit into kind of that box of what's normal, you don't feel like maybe you really fit in well to the community. There might be, threats of deportation. There's custody battles. Crime, is kind of different, experienced differently from a lot of different communities. And then lack of support or representation from people that come from their community. So then how does it impact us as service providers? So, sometimes we internalize that oppression because this is the system that we've been handed. And so at times we can be the oppressors while also being the oppressed, right? And that's a really uncomfortable place to be. So a lot of us as service providers, we're making decisions about things that people get when it comes to resources or services. So when we meet with somebody, based off of our experience with them, sometimes we're the gatekeepers of kind of what's going to happen next for them as far as support or services. And when we ourselves have experienced oppression in our lives, that can feel really uncomfortable when we realize that we're sort of the gatekeepers for somebody else's resources. And as well, our personal values, beliefs, and preferences can sometimes feel like obstacles. So, when we're working in these systems, we're required to work with folks that are very different from us. And sometimes that really puts our personal beliefs or values at stake, right? So, that can put stress on us, or we can feel isolated as service providers because of kind of that dichotomy of experiencing oppression and also being oppressed. So to kind of put some of these words into context, in the world of domestic violence, we love our wheels. And so here's one of the wheels that goes along with that. And so we're not actually going to do this activity, but so in the middle is power and control, and then around that are these different tactics of oppression. So for example, we have violence, economic exploitation, divide and conquer, marginalization, tokenism, scarcity, scapegoating, and stereotyping, and then genocide and dehumanization. So at the core of all of those tactics is power and control. And then the things that come out from the wheel are kind of the ways that those play out. Oops. So the opposite of the wheel of oppression is the wheel of liberation, because we got to have another wheel. So the dismantling racism wheel. So in the middle of this one, instead of power and control, it's equality. And I know that's really kind of small to see. So like I said, I'll send this out for everybody. But just like on the other wheel, the spokes were the things that were tactics of control. On the equality wheel, the tactics that are around it are these different tactics that you can use to practice non-oppressive behavior. So trust and support, respect, move down a little bit, shared responsibility, economic equality, integrity and accountability, non-threatening behavior, responsible advocacy, negotiation, and fairness. So there's lots of kind of good tactics that are part of those spokes in there. All right. So typically we'd have a brief conversation about this image, but since we're kind of running short on time, I'll just explain it a little bit. So the question is, how does oppression hold power in the 21st century? So this ad right here was an ad from 2015, so not too terribly long ago, that was approved and used by PlayStation. And so this ad went out in America and people saw it and they were like, what in the world? This is not okay. I do not feel comfortable with this. And so PlayStation came back and they said, well, we don't want to take credit for it. It actually wasn't our ad. It was created in Japan by an ad company. So really this is their fault. And so then when they went to that ad company and they said, why did you create this ad? Everybody's so upset about this. The ad company came back and said, well, this is kind of our view of America. Like this is, there's still racism. So this, we didn't feel like this would be a controversial thing. So obviously it was, right? But just putting it in context, there were tons of people at PlayStation that saw this ad and approved it before it went out. It wasn't just an ad that was like, surprise, right? There were people that saw this and felt like it was okay. So just kind of an example of how oppression kind of creeps into our society, even in the 21st century. So I do want to bring up the concept of intersectionality. So it's kind of just like a real big fancy word for the idea that the oppressions that folks experience are going to intersect at different levels. So for example, we acknowledge that we are whole beings and we can't be examined separately. So the different parts of our identity can't really be taken apart. We have lots of different intersections about us. So an example of intersectionality, I'm going to have to go off the screen again for just a second. So there was a really amazing report that came out a couple years ago from, it was called the Count Her In report. And it was specifically addressing women and girls in Oregon and lots of different experiences that they have living in their communities. And so one of the things that they focused on was the gender wage gap. And so they broke it down by ethnicity. So right here at the bottom, you can see that for each dollar earned by men, this is what women of each different race or ethnicity earn based off of that. So if there is a male that is earning $1, a white woman is earning 83 cents to that dollar. If it's a Hispanic woman, they're earning 53 cents to that dollar. So you can kind of take a look at that. So why this is an example of intersectionality is because it's that intersection of gender and race, right? That is kind of impacting the way that people are able to access financial stability. And that report was really, really informative. They came up with what they call the 8 that can't wait. And so it was different things that kind of need to be addressed to lift up and empower and build up women in Oregon. But I really like this report because it does it goes into each community specifically. So there's a report that looks at just Douglas County. So there's kind of a lot of good information in there. Okay. And I'm sure that a lot of you have seen this graphic before that kind of shows a good example of equality versus equity. So, equality is giving everybody the same size box and hoping that they can enjoy the game. Equity is giving everybody a box that kind of fits into their height and what, how they could actually access viewing the game. But the bottom part is my favorite because it talks about liberation. So liberation is getting rid of the fence altogether, right? We don't even need the fence there. Let's just let everybody enjoy the game. And then justice also is the people taking down the fence themselves. So we have just a couple more minutes together. So things that I want us to consider: what kind of power do we have as service providers? Why do we consider cultural competency and allyship in our work as service providers? And how do you define allyship in our community? I can only hear little snippets of what people are talking about, but it sounds really interesting. So I wish I could pop around and hear everything that you guys are talking about. So this is kind of where I'll leave us today. I was just chatting with Kenzie about how this can be a 3-hour presentation. So, so we do typically spend a little bit more time together, and there's lots of really good conversation and activities. So we kind of crammed a lot into this little bit of time today. So I really appreciate you all kind of just letting us cram a bunch of information into your brains and for opening up to each other. So just kind of keeping in mind all of these things that we talked about and how they impact the work that we do and how they impact how we see the world. And really at the end of the day, this is what our goal is, right? Is to be allies with the folks that don't have a voice, that don't feel like they have power. We're all here because we want to lift people up and we want our community to feel like a safe, happy, healthy place for everybody that's here. And so in saying that, it really is an active and consistent practice of kind of relearning, reevaluating where we are, and just kind of learning more as things evolve and change. I heard this group talk a lot about just how things have changed so much over the years and just how things are so different. And so I appreciate that people are really looking at that, and we don't want to be stuck. We want to keep moving and we want to keep evolving, and that's what makes us human, and that's what makes us all individual and beautiful and collective at the same time.